The galaxy had forgotten the ducks, but the ducks had not forgotten the galaxy. Long before humanity clawed its way to the stars, the Silth Imperium etched warnings into the obsidian walls of their sacred vaults. Visions of broad-billed creatures with eyes like frozen stars, wings vast enough to eclipse suns, and beaks that cracked moons like eggshells. The Harbingers, they called them. The great Peckers. For millennia Silth priests chanted hymns of dread, their talons trembling as they burned effigies of waterfowl in sulfur pits. But time sanded myth into metaphor, and the ducks faded into children's fables whispered to chicks who feared the dark. No one told the humans. When Earth's coalition scraped together its first diplomatic delegation, they chose Admiral Duckworth Quacker Lee for his mind, not his madness. They ignored the gleam in his eye when he proposed the USS Mallard, a warship cloaked in polymer feathers, its hull curved into a grinning rubber beak. Psychological disarmament, he argued. A gesture of harmless whimsy. The bureaucrats shrugged. Whimsy was cheaper than missiles. They did not know the Silth still dreamt of ducks. As the Mallard breached the summit's exclusion zone, its shadow fell across the Silth Armada like a prophecy resurrected. Sensor arrays fizzed with the ping of panic transmissions. Battle hymns choked mid-verse. Deep in the flagship's heart, High Claw Vera stared at the viewport, their crest flattening as the duck's eye, a cockpit window, round and unblinking, fixed on them. Somewhere in the ship's belly, a human engineer hummed a nursery rhyme and patched a leak with duct tape. The galaxy held its breath. Admiral Lee sipped cold coffee, his thumb brushing the chipped wing of a ceramic duck. He did not smile. Somewhere beyond the stars, his dead wife's laughter echoed, sharp and bright as a supernova. The ducks had arrived. Chapter 1. The stars hung like frozen chandeliers beyond the viewport, indifferent to the absurdity unfolding beneath them. Admiral Duckworth Lee traced the rim of his coffee mug, a chipped ceramic duck with wings for handles, and tried not to think about how much of his life's work now depended on a joke. The USS Mallard hummed around him, her bulkhead walls curved in the cheerful yellow of a child's bathtub toy, her prow sculpted into a grinning rubber beak, wide enough to swallow a frigate. Someone had glued actual feathers along the bridge consoles. Lee didn't know who. He hadn't asked. Guilt, he'd learned, made a poor companion but an excellent bureaucrat. It had convinced the Earth Coalition to let him retrofit a decommissioned warship into this. It had bribed engineers to install hydraulic flapping thrusters. It had even wheedled a committee into approving the mission patch, a duck wearing a naval cap, winking. To piece through whimsy, the memo had declared. Lee's wife would have laughed. She'd been dead 7 years, 2 months, and 14 days. He set the mug down. The liquid inside had gone cold. Beyond the viewport, the summit station loomed, a Silth orbital, all jagged spires and iridescent scales, like a bird of prey mid-molt. The Silth, Avian. Proud, unreadable, his fingers brushed the dossier on his desk. Mythology, ducks as omens of planetary annihilation. He'd skimmed it. He'd skimmed everything since Karis died. Admiral, Ensign Ravi's voice crackled through the intercom. Docking protocols initiated. The Silth are, they're hailing us. Lee straightened his uniform. The jacket was too tight. Karis had tailored it for him, back when his shoulders hadn't hunched under the weight of dead colonists. You're a diplomat, not a pallbearer, she'd say, pinning the seams. Stand like you deserve the room. He stood. The jacket creaked. The bridge smelled of lemon polish and stale anxiety. Crewmen avoided his eyes as he passed, their hands fluttering over holograms of the Silth fleet, sleek, silvered ships shaped like talons. On the main screen, a Silth envoy glared from beneath a crest of cobalt feathers, their beak clacking in clipped galactic common. Unacceptable provocation. Withdraw or face cave. Lee sank into his command chair. The seat hissed, releasing a puff of duck-shaped confetti from some long-ago prank. Translate cave. Ravi swallowed. Closest equivalent, the Great Pecking. Sir, their weapons are powering. Mute. Lee leaned forward. The Silth's eyes were black mirrors, reflecting the Mallard's duck-headed silhouette. He'd seen that look before. On the faces of the Terek envoys, seconds before their shuttle exploded. You didn't listen, Karras whispered in his memory. You never listen, he keyed the comms. High Claw Vera. This vessel is unarmed. A lie, the Mallard's foam missiles were non-lethal, but the Silth wouldn't know that. We're here for dialogue. Vera's feathers ruffled. Dialogue. You arrive in the Harbinger's visage and speak of dialogue. Their voice sharpened into a screech. The prophecies foretold this. Wings to blot the stars. Beaks to crack thee. Lee flicked off the audio. Ensign. Play file Q01. Sir, that's the Quack sound effects. And, Ravi hesitated. The crew held their breath. Somewhere in the ship's belly, a loose panel rattled like a dying laugh. Lee closed his eyes. Do better, Karras murmured. For once, he opened his eyes. Play it. The bridge speakers erupted with a noise like a demonic toddler's bath time. Q Balek Brock. Quack, 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 quack. Vera recoiled, their crest flattening. Lee watched, pulse throbbing in his temples. This was madness. This was his only play. The quacks echoed, dissonant and ridiculous, as the Silth fleet scrambled into attack formation. Sir, Ravi's voice spiked. Their flagship is charging. Hold course. Lee gripped the armrests. The Mallard's duck face filled the view screen, jaunty and grotesque. Karras's voice drowned out the alarms. You're really going to die on this hill, aren't you? He almost smiled. Let them see the duck. Chapter 2. The USS Mallard shuddered as the Silth fleet descended, their ships slicing through the ink of space like scythes. Admiral Lee watched the tactical hologram bloom above the bridge console, red pinpricks of hostile craft swarming the edges of the projection. The rubber duck's grin on the view screen seemed sharper now, less whimsy than rictus. Lee's coffee had gone cold again. He didn't remember pouring it. Guilt, he thought, had a way of curdling things. The crew moved in hushed orbits around him, their voices brittle. Ensign Ravi muttered coordinates under his breath, fingers trembling as he calibrated the Mallard's thrusters. A young engineer, Parker maybe, crouched beneath a sparking panel, swearing softly as she rerouted power to the holographic emitters. The air smelled of burnt insulation, and the sharp, medicinal tang of fear. Lee closed his eyes. Karras would have known their names. She'd always been better with people. You're treating them like chess pieces, she'd said once, her back to him as she scrubbed algae from the viewport of their old rattling freighter. The memory surfaced unbidden, vivid as a hemorrhage. They're not pawns, Duckworth. They're people. Ask Ravi about his daughter. Ask Nguyen why she enlisted. He hadn't. And now Ravi's daughter would grow up fatherless because of him. Another weight for the ledger. Admiral. The engineer Parker, her name tag read, stood before him, grease smeared across her cheek like war paint. The holograms are rigged. But sir, they're just light. The Silth'll see through it in seconds. Lee studied her. Young. Terrified. Alive. How old are you, Lieutenant? 23, sir. Christ. He'd gotten her entire squadron killed at Terek 4 when she was in grade school. Light's all we need. The Silth aren't fighting us. They're fighting a story. He gestured to the view screen, where the Silth flagship loomed, its hull etched with angular glyphs. See those markings? They're not battle honors. They're apologies. Parker frowned. Apologies. To the ducks. He sipped his cold coffee. It tasted like failure. Their ancestors wiped out an entire species for predicting a disaster they caused themselves. Now we've sailed in wearing the ghosts' faces. She blinked. So we're haunting them. We're reminding them. Lee set the mug aside. Activate the holograms. And Lieutenant, tell Ensign Ravi his daughter's name. Parker paled. Sir? You play go with him every shift. He talks about her. Because I don't, he didn't add. Tell him. The ship lurched. Klaxons wailed. Lee gripped the armrests as the holograms flickered to life. Vast, shimmering wings, unfurling from the Mallard's hull. Feathers of photons and lies. On the view screen, the Silth ships stalled, their formation rippling like startled starlings. Hold. Lee willed. Remember your ghosts. A proximity alert screamed. A Silth scout vessel, sleek and needle-like, broke ranks and dove toward the Mallard's underbelly. Lee's throat tightened. Same trajectory as the Terek shuttle. Same angle. Same desperation. Foam missiles armed. Ravi said. His voice steadier now. Your orders, sir? Lee saw Karis in the back of his eyelids. You don't have to keep paying for me. She'd whispered in the medbay. Her hand skeletal in his. You don't have to turn everything into a fire. The Mallard shuddered. The missiles streaked out, their warheads bursting against the scout ship's hull in great blooming clouds of white froth. The Silth vessel spun wildly, foam cascading over its wings like absurdist plumage. On the bridge, someone snorted. A stifled laugh. Raw with nerves. Lee didn't laugh. He watched the Silth ship flounder, its weapons dark, non-lethal. He told the engineers. Something sticky. Something silly. The foam was biodegradable, keyed to dissolve in 12 hours. He'd tested it himself, alone in the hangar, the stuff clinging to his boots like melted marshmallows. Karis would have called it a peace offering. The comms crackled. High Claw Vera's face filled the screen, their cobalt crest matted with what might have been sweat or oil. You mock us, human. You wield the Harbinger's shadow as a joke. Lee leaned forward. The duck's beak on his mug grinned at the edge of the frame. No. We wield it as a mirror. He paused, the words ash in his mouth. You've met monsters before, but we're not yours. Vera's eyes narrowed. Behind them, Silth crewmen clattered their beaks, a sound like knives sharpening, and the substance coating our ships. A bath. Lee held up the mug. Ducks are waterfowl. High Claw. They preen. They float. He let the silence hang. A fragile thing. They don't peck unless cornered. The Silth's gaze flickered to the holographic wings, their edges pixelated and trembling. Your omen is imperfect. So are we. Vera hissed. The screen went dark. Lee exhaled. The bridge stank of adrenaline and overheated circuitry. Ravi turned, his eyes red-rimmed. Sir? They're retreating. For now. For now. Lee nodded. The holograms fizzled, the wings dissolving into static. Somewhere in the ship's depths, a pipe burst, spraying coolant like a severed artery. Parker cursed, scrambling toward the leak. He stood. His knees ached. Karis's voice followed him as he limped toward the lift. You can't outrun the bill, Duckworth. It always comes due. The crew quarters were quieter. The lights dimmed to a bruised purple. Lee's hands shook as he keyed open his bunk. The cot was narrow. The sheets stale. He didn't lie down. Instead he knelt, the deck plating biting his knees, and pulled a small lockbox from beneath the bed. Inside a single holodisc. He slotted it into the wall terminal. Karis flickered to life, laughing, her hair a wild nebula around her face. She held a rubber duck aloft. Its paint chipped. "Look, it's you." The recording glitched, her voice stuttering, all serious and yellow. Lee pressed his forehead to the screen. The terminal's cold seeped into his skin. "You'd hate this," he thought. "The theatrics. The risk." But she'd loved the ducks. Loved them even as the fever ate her. Even when her hands shook too badly to hold them. "They're stupid," she'd croaked in her final hours. A duck clutched to her chest. "Stupid and stubborn. Like you." The terminal beeped. The recording looped. Lee didn't move. Somewhere, light years away, the Silth fleet regrouped. Somewhere, Parker welded a patch over the coolant leak. Somewhere, Ravi whispered his daughter's name into the static. And in the dark, Admiral Duckworth. Lee grieved. Chapter 3. The Silth station loomed like a fossilized claw, its spires curving inward as if to crush the USS Mallard in its skeletal grasp. Admiral Lee stood in the docking bay airlock, the rubber soles of his boots adhering faintly to the floor, a sensation that always reminded him of walking through airport terminals with Karis, back when gravity was a given, and not a negotiation. The Silth had insisted on meeting aboard their vessel, a show of dominance, Lee suspected, or perhaps penitence. Birds, he'd learned, were complicated that way. His breath fogged the visor of his enviro suit, its bulkiness at odds with the Silth's lithe feather-clad forms waiting beyond the force field. They'd demanded he come alone. He'd refused. Now Ensign Ravi stood beside him, clutching a datapad like a hymnal, and Lieutenant Parker lurked at the rear, her tool belt weighted with grenades of her own design. Harmless ones, she'd sworn. Smoke bombs. Glitter canisters. Lee hadn't asked for details. The force field rippled. A Silth guard, taller than the others, their crest dyed the deep crimson of a closed wound, beckoned with a taloned hand. Lee stepped forward. The station's gravity tugged differently, a subtle insistence that made his bones feel brittle. The air smelled of iron and burnt cinnamon. Karis would have hated it here. He could almost hear her. "To Goth Duckworth. Tell them to try some potted plants." The guard led them through arched corridors, the walls etched with murals of Silth history, wars fought under twin suns, feathered legions bowing to creatures with broad bills and empty eyes. Ducks. Lee paused, gloved fingers hovering over a rendering of a duck skeleton, its wings outstretched in a mockery of flight. The Silth artist had painted its beak smeared with blood. "You kept records," Lee murmured. The guard stiffened. To remember shame is to avoid repetition. Their galactic common was accented, each word a clipped wingbeat. Lee's chest tightened. Shame. He knew its topography intimately. The dossier had mentioned Silth historians, their obsession with atonement. But seeing it here, in the sinuous lines of extinct waterfowl, carved by hands that had never touched a living duck, it felt like confession. The audience chamber was a cavern of shadows and sharp angles, lit by bioluminescent fungi clinging to the ceiling like pallid stars.
High Claw Vera waited atop a dais of polished bone, their cobalt crest glinting in the low light. Lee's boots echoed as he approached, the sound swallowed by the room's hungry acoustics. "Admiral." Vera's voice was a serrated thing. "You wear the Harbinger's face, and speak of peace." A contradiction. Lee unsealed his helmet. The air was thin, cold. "We wear our own face. You're the ones who gave it meaning." A murmur slithered through the Silth attendants flanking the dais. Vera's talons flexed, scoring grooves into the bone. "You desecrate memory. Your spectacle insults the lost." Lee's pulse thrummed. Lost. The word conjured Karis's face. Her laughter. The way she'd hum old sea shanties while debugging the nav systems. Lost was a gentler lie. He nodded to Ravi. The ensign tapped his datapad. The chamber lights dimmed. A hologram flickered above Lee's palm. Karis, years younger, sitting cross-legged on their bunk. A rubber duck balanced on her knee. Her voice, warm and crackling with static, spilled into the silence. "Think they're hilarious. Look. It's even got your grumpy eyebrows." Lee's throat closed. He'd played this recording 1,000 times, but never like this. Never as a weapon. Vera recoiled. "What is this?" "A memory." Lee let the hologram expand. Karis's grin filling the room. Her name was Karis. She loved ducks. Not as omens. As toys. Reminders. The Silth shifted, feathers rustling like pages turning. Vera's gaze darted to the holographic duck, its jaunty smile superimposed over Karis's face. "You dare compare our sacred grief to your mate's hobby?" "No." Lee killed the hologram. The darkness rushed back in. "I'm showing you that fear is a story, and stories can change." Silence. Then a sound like wind through dead leaves. A Silth attendant. Laughing. Vera whirled, their crest flaring, and the laughter died. Lee pressed on. "Your ancestors killed the ducks for telling the truth. You're still killing them. Just now they look like us." Vera descended the dais, their movements fluid and lethal. "You claim innocence. Your Mallard orbits our homeworld armed with foam." Parker's voice cut through the tension, high and frayed. All eyes turned to her. She blanched but steadied herself. "The missiles, they're foam. Biodegradable. Harmless." Lee shot her a warning look. She ignored him. "We tested it," she continued, pulling a canister from her belt. "On ourselves. Watch." She sprayed a burst into the air. Glittering pink particles cascaded down, settling on Lee's shoulders like radioactive snow. Vera froze. A glitter flake landed on their beak. They sneezed. "See?" Parker grinned, shaky but triumphant. "Just party supplies." The chamber held its breath. Then, a Silth attendant, smaller, younger, reached out, catching a flake on their talon. They trilled, a sound like a broken music box. Vera rounded on Lee. "Is this your strategy, human? To weaponize frivolity?" Lee met their gaze. "To weaponize hope." The floor shuddered. Alarms wailed, shrill and alien. The attendants scattered as the chamber doors exploded inward, smoke billowing around the jagged silhouette of a Silth warship, older, cruder than the others, its hull scarred with extremist glyphs. Rogues. Lee's mind fractured. Tariq 4. The shuttle. Karis's hand slipping from his. "Admiral." Ravi tackled him as plasma fire seared the air where he'd stood. The scent of singed feathers and melted steel flooded Lee's nostrils. Parker rolled behind a bone pillar, hurling a grenade. It detonated in a burst of neon green smoke, cloaking the room in chaos. Vera shouted orders in Silth tongue, their voice raw. Lee crouched, fumbling for his sidearm useless against armored insurgents. A shadow lunged from the smoke, a blade aimed at Vera's throat. Lee moved without thought. The knife bit into his shoulder, hot and precise. He grappled the attacker, their weight familiar in its desperation. Young, he realized. A Silth youth, their crest still downy. Their eyes met his, wide, terrified, alive, and Lee hesitated. A gunshot rang out. The youth crumpled. Behind them stood Ensign Ravi, his sidearm smoking, his face a rictus of grief. They were going to kill you, he whispered. Lee stared at the body. So small. Blood pooled, black in the low light. Vera loomed over them, their talons trembling. Why? The high claw's voice splintered. Why? Intercede. Lee pressed a hand to his bleeding shoulder. The pain was clean, clarifying, because it's what she would have done. Vera knelt, their talons brushing the dead youth's crest. This one, they were kin. To me. The admission hung like a hanged thing. Lee's vision blurred. Karis, Ravi's daughter, Parker's grenades. All kin, all lost, and found, and lost again. He reached into his chest plate, retrieving a crumpled photo. Karis, him, a rubber duck, water-stained, blood-stained, real. Then let this be the last, he said. Vera took the photo. Their talons left smudges on Karis's face. Chapter 4. The USS Mallard drifted in the aftermath like a wounded bird, her hull streaked with carbon scoring and glittering Silth glyphs, etched hastily over the rubber duck's grin. Admiral Duckworth Lee stood in the ship's arboretum, a relic of Karis's insistence on greenery, where ferns trembled under the artificial breeze, their fronds brushing against the glass walls like the whispers of ghosts. The air smelled of ozone and soil, a dissonant comfort. He cradled a feather in his palm, obsidian and iridescent, given to him by Vera in the bleeding hours after the rogue attack. Honor through absurdity, they'd said. Lee wasn't sure he believed in honor anymore, but he believed in the feather. The crew moved through the ship like shadows, their voices muted, their hands steady. Ensign Ravi had taken to polishing the bridge consoles obsessively, as if scrubbing away the memory of the dead Silth youth's face. Lieutenant Parker welded Silth alloy onto the Mallard's battered thrusters, her goggles reflecting sparks that fell like dying stars. No one celebrated. Survival, Lee had learned, was a quieter thing than triumph. He found Vera in the docking bay, their talons clicking against the Mallard's deck, as they studied the ship's makeshift repairs. The high claw's crest had lost its cobalt sheen, dulled by ash and grief. They did not turn as Lee approached, their gaze fixed on a mural Parker had scrawled in grease pencil, a duck wearing a Silth warhelm, its beak curved in a peaceable smirk. Your people are persistent, Vera said at last, the galactic common vowels rasping like wind over stone. Stubborn, Lee corrected. He leaned against a bulkhead, the feather's edge pricking his thumb. We've had practice. The high claw's nostrils flared, inhaling the stench of solder and human sweat. This vessel is a carcass. Why not let it die? Lee's jaw tightened. He thought of Karis's funeral. The way he'd insisted on burying her in the old Earth soil. She'd smuggled aboard their first ship. Roots need home, she'd say, patting the illegal terrarium. Even if home's just a lie we tell ourselves. Because we rebuild, he said. Even the lies. Vera turned, their eyes reflecting the mural's absurd duck. The Accord will ratify the treaty at dawn. Your Mallard will be an embassy. The word twisted in their beak, equal parts mockery and wonder. Lee nodded. The feather trembled. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ravi's pistol flash. The Silth youth falling. Karis's hologram dissolving into static. You don't get to choose what haunts you, she'd told him once, laughing, as she reprogrammed a malfunctioning replicator to spit out nothing but rubber ducks. But you can choose the ghosts you feed. The signing ceremony was held in the Silth station's lowest chamber, a cavernous space where the walls dripped with bioluminescent lichen, their glow catching the edges of ancient duck skeletons fossilized in the stone. Lee had expected grandeur, a cathedral of guilt and reconciliation. Instead, it felt like a tomb. He stood beside Vera, the feather tucked into his breast pocket, its edge pressing against his heart. The Accord delegates hovered in holographic arrays, their faces flickering like distant constellations. No fanfare, no speeches, only the scratch of talons on parchment, as Vera signed, their ink mixed with the ash of the dead rogue kin. A Silth tradition, Lee had been told, to bind the past to the future. When it was his turn, Lee hesitated. The treaty's galactic common script blurred. Karis would have joked about the font. He reached into his pocket, brushed the feather and signed. The room exhaled. Later, in the Mallard's mess hall, Parker presented him with a new coffee mug, clumsily molded from Silth ceramic, its handle shaped like a duck's wing. To replace the chipped one, she said, her voice gruff. Ravi did the glazing. It's less ugly than the original. Lee turned it in his hands. The glaze was uneven, the wing lopsided. Perfect. Thank you, Lieutenant. She lingered, picking at a welt scar on the table. They're calling it the Treaty of the Duck. Back on Earth. He almost smiled. Of course they are. But the grave was where he'd left it. On a hill overlooking what had once been the North Sea. Earth's sky hung low and gray, the salt wind carrying the keening of gulls. Lee knelt, the feather in one hand, the mug in the other. Karis's headstone was simple, the dates worn smooth by storms. You'd hate this, he thought. All this drama over a bird. But she'd have loved the silence, the realness of it. No holograms, no quacks, no foam missiles. Just the sea's murmur, and the weight of a feather, lighter than regret. He pressed the feather into the soil. We got it right, he said. The wind answered, tugging at his hair, and for a moment, it felt like her hand. Nuff. Epilogue. The quaking star. The embassy's halls echoed with the laughter of Silth chicks, their talons skittering across floors, inlaid with terrazzo ducks. Human children chased them, rubber ducks clutched in their fists, their squeals harmonizing with the trill of alien tongues. In his office, Admiral Duckworth, Lee sipped from Parker's mug, the coffee bitter and perfect. On the wall, a framed photo. Karis, him a duck, watched over the chaos. Vera entered, a scroll clasped in their talons. The Accord requests your presence. Another summit, another delicate negotiation. Lee set the mug down. Tell them we'll bring the duck. Vera's beak clacked. A Silth laugh. They're already terrified. Outside the stars winked. Indifferent and bright.